Is it possible to really buy a property in South Africa for free? In other words, it's never ever going to cost you a cent out of your own pocket. The answer is yes, but the but is you have to have the skills. Without the skills, it is simply not going to be possible. I'd like to take you on a journey to how I discover this and the 3 phases that you have to follow, always in the right sequence or in a specific order, because otherwise it's not going to work. And hopefully by giving you this information, you'll be able to start making informed decisions when you invest in property. I'm Dreyer. I'm the founder of the Wealth Creators Method as well as Property School. I started Property School about 20 years ago when I started teaching people how we retired at the age of 37 by simply using property. Now, what is that sequence that I'm talking about? When you look at property investments, it's the psychology, the science, and the art of investing in property. So that's the sequence. The psychology has got to do with the mental mindsets, the attitude. So what is your investment attitude? Is it short term? Is it long term? Do you want to make a quick buck? Do you want to speculate? What is it that you want to achieve? And I'm talking about specifically property investment. So why did I start to invest in property? Now, you will have a different reason. But my reason, in other words, my goal, because unless you've got a goal, you're not going to start with this process. My goal was to get to financial freedom within a 10-year period. At that stage, I was a certified financial planner, and I could clearly see that by following any other strategy, that I would never ever be financially free. Even if I take every cent that I've earned and put it in normal places like unit trust or endowment policies or retirement annuities, or it would not work, right? And I wanted to find a way around this simply because when I looked at some of my clients at that point in time, I could see that there was ways because they have made it in less than 10 years. And one of the ways that they've used was property investments. But there's a very specific way to invest in property that I had to discover, and I'd like to share that with you. But it all starts with the psychology, and the psychology is the mindset. In other words, you have to see this as a long-term project. Now, nowadays, it is possible literally to start with basically nothing, on condition that you've got the skills, and be financially free within a 5-year period. So financial freedom was my personal drive. That was my why. And you have to ask yourself, but what is your why? In other words, set a goal, and then what's the reason why you want to achieve that goal? Because without that, it's going to be very, very difficult in order to maintain your focus and stay focused over the next 5 years or even longer. Right, so that's the first part. The second part, when it comes to property, there's a lot of, in terms of the psychology, we're still busy with the psychology. In terms of the psychology, there's going to be a lot of hiccups along the way. How on earth are we going to overcome them? And mentally, we have to be prepared before we actually start the journey. In other words, before you start, you need to know that there will be hiccups. It's not going to be sailing the whole time. If you go to tenants, they're going to give you hassles. The interest rates will fluctuate. There will be unforeseen expenses. How are you going to handle them, and are you mentally prepared to handle them? If that part of the question of the question basically is no, I won't be able to do it, and I don't like it, and I don't like hassles, then my friend, don't go for property, because you're going to waste your time, you're going to waste your money, and you don't want to be there, because it's not only upside. The upside is once it starts to work and you can retire and be at places where I am at the moment, as an example, on a game farm where even though we're here, I know that my property is bringing me income each and every month, each and every week, each and every day. And that is the beauty of property. So in the beginning, it did take time, it did take effort, it did take mindsets that I had to change in order to be able to achieve this. So today it's easy, right? But right in the beginning, it did take time and effort And I had to change my mindset several times in order to align myself, in order to stick this out, so that we can have this freedom where we can do what we want to do, when we want to do, how we want to do it, where we want to do, with whom we want to do, without worrying about money. And this is something that property can give you that very, very few other investments will be able to give you. So the mindset, the psychology, that's where it starts. And if that is not in place, the next part automatically will not get into place. And that is the science part. Now, what is the science? The science are the numbers. Property is a numbers game. It's got nothing to do with emotion. And most people invest emotionally when they invest in property, especially people who are buying their houses. One of the biggest mistakes that you can ever make in your life is to buy your house. And I'll show you in a webinar that I've got, or a masterclass, why I say this. Right, so that is the last thing that you should do, because your property, your house that you're going to stay in, will be one of the biggest expenses. And if you do not know, in other words, if the psychology is not right and you don't know how to handle that, that house will cost you your freedom. So it's the numbers game. And what I did was, in 1987, because there are so many variables, there's 27 variables on property as an example, and each and every variable, the moment that that variable changes, the numbers will change. So unless you've got a system, that's why in 1987 I developed the Property Pro investment system. Now here's something that very few people get. That system from then, since then till today, has not changed one. Because it's based on principles. So the moment that you start changing stuff to try to make provision for other stuff, right, then you know that you are not busy with principles. And property is based on principles, at least the Property Pro investment system. There are 27 variables, and those variables, they can fluctuate. And you can determine the growth by having a look at all these fluctuations. So property is about doing the sums. If the sum does not gel, you don't invest in property. Now, I'd like to give you a tip. And again, there's a way that you can get this for free. Before you start, once you've set your goal, then that goal becomes what we call your freedom number, right? The freedom number is going to be dependent on the amount of money that you've got available to invest. In other words, the amount of money out of your own pocket. And that is how we measure how much a property really is going to cost, as well as what's the growth on that property. So you've got, let's say, 1,000 Rand that you can spend out of your own pocket. And if you invest that 1,000 Rand each and every month into this property, then it's going to give you a growth rate. So the freedom number is there for you to calculate your investment growth rate. And that investment, very, very simple calculation. I will take you through the process. I'll do it free of charge. In the past, I've asked money in order to do this, but I really want to help you to get the education so that you can make informed decisions before you invest in property. So that then is actually the goal. So the freedom number gives you the idea of what the goal is, but then how hard must your money work in order to go from where you are to where you want to be in the shortest possible time with the least amount of risk. In other words, only that 1,000 Rand, if that is what you can afford to invest. Of course, each and every person has got a different amount. And it's going to vary during the time, because if interest rate goes up, you're going to pay more. If there's no tenants in your place, you're going to pay a lot more. But you have to make provision for all of that. And scientifically, there's a way that we can do it. And it's actually very simple, because it takes you less than 2 to 3 hours. And I will teach you exactly how the system operates so that you'll be able to get exactly the same kind of results. So that's the science. The science then is the numbers, right? The third part is where the art of investing in property comes in. And this is where 99% of the people don't get it. You see, these 27 variables that's been captured within the system to do the calculation, each and every one of those variables are actually a risk. So if the interest rate goes up, your risk becomes higher. Now, if there's no tenant, the risk goes higher. If you pay too much for the property, the risk goes up. In other words, With property, the moment that the risk goes up, it means the growth is going to come down. And if you can get the risk down, you're going to find with property that the growth goes up. So it's exactly the opposite. Can you see the psychology right in the beginning? We've learned that the higher the risk, the higher the growth. With property, it's not the case. The moment that you understand the science, you're going to see that when the risk comes down with property, the growth will go up to a point where there's no risk. You take all the risk out of the property, and therefore you get an infinite growth on your investment. In other words, financially, that property is not going to cost you a cent to get, to keep, and to build your retirement or your freedom on that property. And this is the beauty, but we still lack one part, and that part is where the art comes in. And the art is where you're going to, once you know how to turn this science into art, this is where you're going to get your properties for free. Why? You see, each and every variable is actually a risk. So in the system, you identify all the risk. But then you have to learn the skill, and this is where the time and effort is going to come in. So that skill is, how do I offset, or how do I mitigate the risk on that specific variable or on that risk? Now, what is risk? Risk is when you do not know what you're doing. In other words, if you do not have the skills, or you do not know that a risk exists, and remember there are 27 variables, 27 risks, it means that you're not going to make provision for that risk in the event of that thing happening. Now, here's the problem. What happens when all of those things happen at exactly the same time? In other words, let's assume that the interest rate goes up, the house prices come down, you do not have a tenant. How on earth do you handle that risk, or the risk that goes with that? If you do not have the skills and do not understand how to handle it, you're going to lose that property, and you're going to lose all the money that you've put into that property, and you will never ever be financially free. And this has happened to so many people. Why? Because right in the beginning they did not follow this 3-step process: psychology, science, and art. So the art is where you mitigate, you know the risk, you identify the risk, and you learn how to offset that risk. And by learning practical application, practical knowledge, that gives you the skill. And the moment that you've got the skill, then that risk can happen, and you will not lose any money or that property. And this is the beauty about following this 3-step process. So if this is something that you are interested in, I'm going to have a webinar called the Property Accelerator, a masterclass, where I'm going to take you through 3 accelerators. And the first accelerator will be the mindset. Why is it that we are making mistakes, and why is it that we are conditioned to think that our property is a great investment? So I'm going to literally break that down and show you that property, your house, and for most people, will be one of the worst investments that you can ever make. Now, there's something that goes with this, and this is this thing where I hear people say, you have to pay additional on your property and you're going to save a lot. That is the biggest lot of nonsense that I've ever heard in my life when it comes to property investments. If you want to pay off your house, great. But remember, the banks want you to pay off your bond faster. Why? There's a very specific reason that you'll find out during that masterclass. So by paying back your bond, you are making the banks richer, and that is why they let you believe psychologically, mentally, that it's a good thing. But I will prove to you that it's one of the worst things that you can ever do in your life. Right. There's another thing that I see people are a little bit confused about, and that is that, yeah, but the banks do not want to give me more money to buy more property, or I haven't got the security, or I haven't got a job. Right. Now, in the property mentoring masterclass, there you'll see that you don't need money to buy property. But here's the thing. If you buy that property without, say, for example, the bank's money, the risk becomes exponentially higher. So you have to go get the right information in the right order for the level of the game that you're at, and then you have to apply it. And the reason for that is very, very simple. So that if you buy the wrong property, even if you do not use the bank's money, you will never become rich. It is going to be a dead property simply because you did not follow the psychology, the science, and the art part of that property. Right, so that is why it is so important. But I'd like to give you one of 8 ways in the event that you think that it is impossible. But again, I'm going to show you the disadvantage of doing that. So once you start buying properties and you get it for free and you don't use the bank's money, then you have to have the skills, the art. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's going to work against you. And I really want to help you so that you can see how this works. Now, let's take it one step further. So now we've got a benchmark. We see that property is not working. There's a way that you can accelerate this process, and this is where the second accelerator comes in. And the second accelerator is you can, instead of going and getting a degree, or maybe you've got no qualifications, or maybe you haven't passed high school, or maybe you haven't got a job, maybe you don't understand finances and the economy and stuff like that. There's a way literally that you can learn all of this by following what we call the golden triangle success method. By following that method, you can succeed in property in a very, very short time. In fact, less than a week, training will put you in a position, and that is what I'm going to explain. And then the third part is where we get into the accelerator principles, really, because we've got the benchmark, we know what we can and what we can't do, we know the wrong way that most people are buying properties, and now we get into it and we say, okay, how can I get that property without costing me a cent, a single cent? In other words, I'll have all that money. So for the same amount of money, one person is going to sit with absolutely that, another person will sit with a property that is fully paid and that has never ever cost him or her a cent out of their own pocket, because that is how we measure that growth. Also be careful, when I say a property is for free, I mean financially. There will be time, there will be effort, there will be work that you need to do in terms of your mindset. And that is not free, right? So it takes time, it takes effort. But if you're not willing to take the responsibility to put in the time and the effort to learn the skills, then nothing that I can teach you, right, is going to work. And for that reason, please do not book for this masterclass. It's the accelerator masterclass. It's not going to work for you, really. And because, as I've said, it's going to take time and effort that you have to put in, because otherwise it's not going to work. The second accelerator is by twisting a very small one of the variables, by just very small, slightly, with the minimum amount of time and effort that you put in. Not only will the property be paid, and I'm going to use a R1,000,000 example property. In other words, it can be R1,000,000 property. If you've got 500,000, it's going to be half of that. If you want to buy 2 million, it's double that. So the principles work on any property, residential, commercial, industrial, developments, you name it, right? So the principles are working, but once you understand this principle, you can apply it to your specific situation. So you'll sit with between 500 to R1,000,000 additional on top of the fact that the property is paid in full and it did not cost you a cent more than a person that has bought the house in the wrong way, that has lost a lot of money over a 5-year period. Now, the next accelerator is where we're really going to jack up this, where I'm going to show you that there's a way, by applying all 4 the high value skill sets of a wealth creator, that you can get to 20 million rands worth of properties in cash in 5 years without going to a bank, without security, without nothing. But this will take serious dedication, serious effort and time in the beginning to put in. But once you've got it, again, it's going to be sailing. So if this is something that you'd like to understand and to know, you'll find, first of all, on YouTube. Please make sure that you like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so. I also plan to do a whole series on property and on the psychology, the science and the art, where I'm going to help you and educate you on YouTube. But remember, this is not the same. this is not going to give you the skills, it's going to give you the information. You have to go through a very specific process in order to learn the skills. But if this is something that you'd like, simply go down to the comments and tell me if you think that I should put in the time and the effort to educate people on the psychology, the science, and the art of investing in property, where we take these three, let's call it pillars, and start diving lesson by lesson deeper and deeper into properties and how to look out for example, the 7 laws of a property investor and why those laws are so important from a psychological point of view in order to start this process. Also, you'll find that link for the masterclass. Maybe it says book now, or maybe in YouTube you're going to find, or somewhere you're going to find a link, normally in the description area, where click on that, book for your seat, and then pitch up. Now, what is it that you're going to get once you pitch up and once you've listened to this? I promise you that you will be blown away with the information, because there's a very specific way that I'm going to take you through the process to give you a picture in order to make an informed decision if property is for you or not, and what you need to do in terms of psychology, science, and art in order to become a successful property investor. Now, I'm going to touch on the mindsets, therefore I'm going to give you a free course, we call it the Quantum Awakening, to understand how we think and why we are in this situation where we cannot see and believe that property is a great investment to start off with. So it's the mindset. Free of charge. I've asked 3,750 rands in the past for this specific course, the Quantum Awakening. I'm going to open that course to you just for being there and being present. Now, the second thing is I'm going to show you how to calculate your own financial freedom number and your financial freedom growth rate. Very important that you understand it. Again, a crash course that we've asked 1,750 rands in the past. I'll give that to you for free, because that's the second part, because now you know what growth you must get. Then I'm going to give you the Power Goal book, ebook, again for free. So that once you understand this, that you know how to set the goal and what are the 5 steps that you have to take in order to set right goals, power goals, not smart goals, power goals that work. And then lastly, I'm going to give you the Formula for Riches ebook, which is basically a condensed version of the steps that we take in terms of the wealth creator strategy. And the wealth creator strategy is the intelligent use of limited resources to go from where you are to where you want to be in the shortest possible time with the least amount of risk. And then in the masterclass, I'm going to give you the overview of the method, the wealth creators method that we follow in order to take 100 rand in total, less than 100 rand, and turn it into 20 million, where you can buy 20 million rands worth of property without costing you a cent more than the 100 rand, on condition that you are willing to put in the time and the effort to learn the skills of a wealth creator in order to be a wealth creator. Right, that's the whole process. So if this is something that you are interested in, book your seat, but also remember to give me the comment if you'd like to have more information, where we go a lot deeper into the psychology, then into the science, and then into the art of investing in property, and why I believe that property is one of the best investments that you can ever make in your life.